and it's become a bit of a thing amongst a group of friends of mine. We like to make a bit of fun of it, see how many birds we can see in a particular local government area. And we have a few jokes about, when someone reaches the top of the list and they've seen the most in the
Yeah.
area, they become the quote unquote mayor of the local government area. So that's a bit of fun just to kind of, make it a bit more enjoyable like that. And we have a few group chats about those kind of things quite regularly. And yeah, it's just another aspect that adds, I think, I suppose adds another dimension to birding.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Birding Today podcast, where birders come together to discuss the joy of birding. I'm your host, Guillaume Doerig. Today's guest is 45 years old and has had a lifelong interest in birds and nature in general. The majority of his birding has been within Victoria. He has recorded over 400 species in the state. Impressive. He has also birded in Tasmania, New South Wales and South Australia, as well as Canada and the USA. Birding has been a more serious pursuit for him since about 5 years ago. And I'm excited to get into this episode, so please welcome Leigh Pieterse, everyone. How are you doing, Leigh?
Good. How you going?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks for coming on.
No worries. My pleasure.
So let's jump right in. So what aspect of birding brings you the most joy, do you think?
Just generally being in the bush, I think, and just being away from throngs of people and noise and concrete. Like most people who live in suburbia or live in the city, it's a kind of good escape. I mean, I do a lot of local birding, but a lot of it is outside of town. So, but I think also just the ability to have something to focus on intently, and it's part of the natural world. And birds, I don't know, probably a good example because they're literally everywhere you go. It doesn't matter whether you're actually in the city or not, even when you're kind of out of town, which is probably arguably more enjoyable because it's, a bit more close to the natural world, and nature is more enjoyable than probably going birding in town. But I think the fact that you can do it anywhere is always a big, has always been an attraction for me. You can literally step outside your front door. But yeah, I think kind of for me personally, just getting another excuse to kind of be outside and be in the bush and be amongst nature, I think, in general. That's I'd say the main draw card for me, amongst the other reasons as well, but mainly that though, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we could almost pan out from that question and say, what brings you joy from being outdoors? What brings you joy from being in the elements, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, like I've always been an outdoorsy person. Most of my life, like grew up as a young kid camping, and went away on school holidays, pretty much every school holidays to, I guess areas outside of town. And I guess since then, I mean, I've always pursued things that have generally been outdoors. I've been an avid cyclist for most of my life, so I spent a lot of time cycling outside, and out of town. Not so much more in recent years, but yeah, I guess birding's been an extension of, I think, just being outdoors. I do like being at home sometimes, but I'm not much of one to sit still, and generally thrive on being away and outside somewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that sort of leads into my next question, which is, so you love being outdoors and you love nature and all that. So what triggered that interest? And so it's kind of a two-part question. What triggered your interest in nature in general and birds in particular, would you say?
I suppose the area I grew up in was, when I grew up there, I mean, it's very much built up suburbia now, but the area that I grew up in and out of Melbourne was a bit more semi-rural in my younger years. So I probably, came across a bit of an appreciation that way because there was, I guess there was a lot of things to do, not too far to go that involved nature, some good parks and as I said, I spent most of my years actually outside. So I think it comes from that, but also I think from probably encouragement from family and friends like mum and, and I think the family in general have always liked being outside. So, and going away on trips, as I said, for school holidays, like we'd usually go, nowhere, exotic, but definitely generally coastal Victorian locations and things like that. Or, so I got used to being, I think like things like camping and just, even if you weren't out doing really vigorous, recreational pursuits, but generally just being away from town, I think gave me an appreciation for nature, I think, from an early age. So, and that's something I've tried to continue with most of my life, and have, depending on where I've been living and the various pursuits that I've kind of been interested in. But it's always something that's kind of stuck me in one form or another.
Yeah, for sure. And it really does help when there's, when you've got family and friends that are also into the same thing. That's really the clincher for me. And I'm starting to say this more and more, but birding is as much about people as it is about birds, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of, birding's a funny one, because I have for instance, I have a core of really good birding friends that I really enjoy spending time with going birding. But like a lot of the time, I'm also happy just to, it's something that I enjoy doing by myself, like quite a bit, especially locally. Generally, when I go away, I tend to go away with people. But if it's, generally locally, it's maybe one or two others, a couple of friends. But quite often, I'll just, spend a lot of the time just birding alone. I think it's a really good solo activity as much as it is a group activity. And I do love the people. There's some really great people that are into birding, and have met some wonderful folks over the years. But I think the alone time that it gives you as well, no matter where you are, is really important. And you've been living in Melbourne, you know what it's like. I'd be lying if I said it's been pretty miserable and hard to take at the best of times over the past number of months. So I think the ability to kind of, go outside, even though we haven't been able to go far, and just spend a bit of time by yourself, even though it has been very hard to get away from throngs of people. But I've still managed to find a few spots where I can do a bit of birding, and not get too encroached on by lots of people and lots of dogs and whoever else is poking around. So for me, it is also the solo time as well, as much as it is a group activity. Like I like birding in groups, small groups. If I'm honest, I don't like it much in bigger groups though. Like anything more than 3 or 4, I find it a bit too kind of, I don't know, it's like I wait for everyone to see the bird and then move on. I find that kind of small core a lot more enjoyable, and also just by myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's got different advantages, doesn't it? Because when you're on your own, well, I find personally, when you're on your own, you see more birds. I reckon.
Yeah, well, you kind of, I suppose it's that thing. It can be advantageous to be with other people, because obviously there's more eyes, so there's more people looking for things. But I think when you're on your own, you're never under any, spoken or unspoken pressure to move on. You can do your own thing and spend as much time as where you want, and there's not always going to go, oh, what do you want to move on, or what do you want to do now? You can just, be your master of your own destiny. When you're birding by yourself, you can decide whether you want to spend 5 minutes in one place or 5 hours in one place. Not too many people spend 5 hours in one spot, but I think the kind of the solo birding from that aspect is kind of good. And you're probably right. I think to some degree you do. Maybe you see more birds in that way. And I think in some respect you're probably right.
So you mentioned that you do a lot of local birding, and that's one of the topics that we were kind of emailing back and forth about, like LGA list, local government area kind of listing. Do you want to talk a bit about that? What do you do? What's that about?
Well, admittedly, it was more to something. I think during the whole COVID scenario that's happened, it's something I've got a lot more into. I've always enjoyed local birding, as long as I've been into birding. But I think during COVID, especially last year, we went into lockdown and couldn't really go far. It's like, okay, I'm going to explore my local areas. And if I can't go very far, then you start discovering places you hadn't been. And of course, you become very familiar with those places. So, I think like local government area birding's a thing that I became more attracted to for that reason, because you don't have to go very far. And at that stage, we couldn't go far, and obviously we still can't. But and it's become a bit of a thing amongst a group of friends of mine. We like to make a bit of fun of it, see how many birds we can see in a particular local government area. And we have a few jokes about, when someone reaches the top of the list and they've seen the most in the area, they become the quote unquote mayor of the local government area. So that's a bit of fun, just to kind of, make it a bit more enjoyable like that. And we have a few group chats about those kind of things quite regularly. And it's just another aspect that adds, I think, I suppose there's another dimension to birding. In some respect.
For sure. And it's also another way to bond, for example, like you're saying with your friends. And so is that so do you use eBird to track how many species you see and stuff?
I'd hate to admit I'm not an addict to eBird, but I'm definitely as much as I like birding for the sake of birding, I'm definitely an addict to making lists of birds. Like most people who are seriously into birding are. It's yeah, but I do though. I try and use eBird for that, for that reason. Also, it's obviously a really good tool. Like I think it's a good citizen science tool if it's used, to its best of its abilities, and it's
Yeah.
good from that respect. But also, I think it's an easy way just to record what you're seeing, even if you aren't doing it for any particular purpose other than your own records. Like it's very, very easy. Obviously the old school folks, would carry around the notebook and the pen and paper, and I used to do that a little bit. But I think once I got a phone that finally worked all right, I started using eBird, and that's probably the most simple way to do things. So but I definitely record pretty much all the birding I do. I mean, if it's somewhere that I go to a lot, sometimes I won't, but for the most part, as with everybody now, they have a phone on. You pull your phone out and just record the birds. Sometimes I do it after the fact, but I definitely use it. It's good, and it makes it so easy just to be able to scroll through and see what you've seen over the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really good. Like I've mentioned a few times on this podcast, I keep like a month to month list of what I've got. Like I'm trying to beat the previous month. Yes, but so this month is going to look good, I think, because now we can get out of our 15K. It's going to be better.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we have been doing with the LGA listing is a friend of mine, Daniel Terrington, kind of has been keeping kind of pretty vigorous track of everyone's local government area birding and who's on top where and what they saw in one year and what did they see the next year. So he's well and truly across all that stuff, which is pretty funny. Like I'll get a message from him and say, "Oh, you saw 110 birds last year in Darebin, and now you're going to see 111." So it's fun having people like that are really into it, and it encourages you. Of course, you think, "Oh, I can go out and maybe find something somewhere that I haven't seen to boost that number up." But yeah, I do like the numbers game. It's a bit of fun.
For sure.
I think like most people, I mean, I think most people who are into birding probably aren't into it for one, very particular reason. I mean, some folks are, but I think there's a lot of different reasons why, people are into it, and there's obviously different things you can get out of it, and that's just another thing to kind of focus on and spend a bit of time doing, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's pretty accurate, I think. And so just to finish up the LGA section, what's your LGA?
Yeah, so I live in Thornbury, obviously in the inner city. So I'm in Darebin, so that pretty much covers most of. I mean, I don't know. This is going to reach what audience it's reaching, but obviously from people from Melbourne are probably quite familiar with most of the Melbourne area. So that my area like pretty much comprises most of Northcote, Thornbury, Preston, Reservoir, Bundoora. So yeah, it's a not a really, really big area compared to obviously regional and sub-regional government areas, but there's quite a bit of variety considering it's a inner to middle city kind of area. I've been surprised at some of the things I've been able to find when I started really poking around. So and I think when you do have that focus to go birding in your local government areas, you really do. I started looking at maps and kind of from like Google Maps and satellite views going, oh, I wonder what's here. I'll go and have a poke around. So I definitely found areas that I hadn't, really didn't even know existed. And I thought, I'll go up and have a look at them. So it's good
I think all of us have done that. I think is like, I think there's a specific website that can delineate the radius. And then you kind of have to look where where the limit is and follow the line and see how far can I go.
I mean, I think luckily for me, like being in to get back to the government area birding, I think for me, like when it was down to the 5K limit of travel, I could still get to most of my most of my government area because it's relatively small. So that was kind of good. There's a few areas I didn't go to that right up in the top corner, but for the most part, I could still reach the spots that I would normally go to anyway, even if we weren't in lockdown as far as local birding goes. So it was good like that. Yeah.
And what would be because like obviously at time of recording things are going to open up soon. But so during these past since July, where have you been going? What's your favorite spot to go birding during lockdown?
So I suppose right on the edge of my 5 kilometre limit. The area that's just south, I guess it's just southwest of La Trobe University, is pretty good. There's like a big lake that's that is attached to the sports fields there that is owned by the university, and then that abuts up to a creek line, and which has got pretty good riparian vegetation. There's actually a good section of grassland there, so that has probably been the most reliable and most enjoyable spot over the past year to go, because it's delivered the best variety of birds, and it's actually probably been the least busy as far as not just for birders, but as far as people in general, because as you know, every park and every street and every road and every footpath and whatever else has just really been kind of busy. So it has been, as you know, hard to escape people in general. So that has been my kind of, I suppose, my number one go-to area over the last year, purely because it's been quiet and because the variety of birds, as far as local birding goes, has been really quite good. Like I've seen some really, really good things out there over the last year. So, and things I wasn't even, really thinking about seeing. So, but that's always the way with birding. Sometimes things turn up that you're not really expecting. So, yeah,
absolutely, yeah, I agree with that. And just to look back on, we'll come to the specific birds in a bit, but just to come back on what you said about all the trails being so busy and stuff. I think the only real way you can combat that is to get out really early in the morning, maybe.
Yeah, that's the thing. On the weekends, I would generally try and get out early. I mean, admittedly, being in lockdown, I think 2 years in a row, obviously went into lockdown in winter, and as everyone knows in Melbourne, it's pretty damn hard to be motivated to get up at 6 a.m. in June or July. So, but I did do that sometimes. Sometimes I'd go out before work. If I had to go to work during the week, I'd go out before work. But definitely really early in the morning is the best, without doubt, if you can get yourself up. But I suppose that holds true for birding, and no matter where you are to some degree. Like early in the day is always, quite good and probably quite unique in some respects. But I think I'm lucky that area that I go to, it gets some people walking along the creek and a few people walking around with dogs. But overall, you can still kind of largely keep to yourself, and not have to avoid people the whole time, which other places I've been to birding, like down on the Merry Creek or other places, I just spent more time trying to avoid people and actually zigzagging around and actually birding. So I thought, well, what's the point? I may as well try and find somewhere that's not as busy, and that turned out to be the good spot. So
oh, well, that's good. That's really good. And so so you said that you saw some pretty good birds by urban standards. What are some of the best ones you've seen, like past year or past 2 years?
So I mean, I was actually just looking at the kind of list of birds that I'd seen out in that particular spot in the last year, and I've seen over 100 species out there now, which is kind of quite good. And probably spring has been the best time for interesting things turning up. Probably the best bird is in, not so much my favorite bird, but probably as far as rare at that area goes, I saw a pair of rainbow beaters out there last year. Which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that was off the back of a couple of days of strong northerlies. I was out with a friend of mine, Gareth, and heard the call, and he was only really an absolute newbie birder at that stage, and he's like, "Oh, they're beaters, aren't they?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, they are." So that was pretty cool to see rainbow beaters in you're literally in Bundoora. So that was good. But mainly the spring birds have been great. Both species of songlarks I've seen out there. Brown quail, Lewin's rail, spotless crake. So nothing, I wouldn't say anything really rare, but definitely things that I would have never expected to see only, like 5 or 6 kilometers from home.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the advantages, so to speak, of the pandemic, is that we were forced to do this kind of thing. We were forced. Well, I don't know if forced is the right word, but we were.
You got to find something to do, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you had this radius, and you went. It just meant that we had to look harder for the birds that were closer, and inevitably that means that you start finding some pretty good birds close to home. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. I mean, that particular area is an area that I'd been birding at a few times before, but only really kind of ridden past and hadn't stopped and extensively. Stopped off and walked around. But once we started being restricted to the distance, I thought I'll ride out there and lock the bike up and actually walk around and spend, like an hour walking around or whatever. And that's when I really did start to see, a good variety, and did realize that actually that particular area is for where it is, it's actually got some pretty intact habitat there, which is quite nice. So the grassland there is in fairly good condition. It's only small, but yeah, that's obviously supports grassland species, as I said, like the songlarks and cisticola and
Oh yeah.
those kinds of things. Yeah, so then that butted up against the Darebin Creek's right next to that. So then we got kind of riparian habitat birds, some, you know, like more smaller passerines and some of the, you know, more common bush birds. But once again, things that I wouldn't have even really kind of been on my radar. You know, I thought I'll go birding in Thornbury and Heidelberg and kind of Northcote or you know, or Bundoora or Latrobe, and thought, what can I see? Well, I mean, most of the time when you associate urban birding or you think about urban birding, you're like, oh, I can see a common miner, a noisy miner, or a magpie, or both wattle birds. I mean, they're all great to see, but yeah, I think it's definitely rewarding when you start seeing different things that you didn't expect to turn up.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that you go riding a lot along these places. So I want to get into that a little bit, because that's really interesting. You know, I think I told you in an email just before that I had a guest on. I think it was yesterday or the day before, Deb Oliver. Deb.
Yeah,
So she hi Deb. If
yeah, I
watching.
haven't seen Deb for a long time, but I've been birding with Deb a bit over the years, previous years. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Not via bike, incidentally, but yeah, I do know Deb reasonably well. So yeah. No,
Oh, that's
great.
cool. And well, see, she was the one. See, because we connected just before we did our episode, and she said, "Oh yeah, I do this crazy thing. I go cycle birding," and I was like, "Oh wow, that's cool. What's that?" And so we talked all about that and about how it differs a little bit to normal birding, and how you can cover more distance, and how and how you can cover more habitat types and stuff, because she lives out of Melbourne. Do you do any of that, or do you mostly kind of?
Yeah, I do. Like, I suppose for me, like, you know, when you said, you know, I do this crazy thing called cycle birding, like I wouldn't even think that's remote. I mean, I don't find that remotely abnormal for me, because I'm obviously an avid cyclist. I mean, I work with bikes all day long. So I mean, and cycling is something I've done my whole life. So I'm very used to getting around on a bike if it's short distances anyway. So I mean, I live in town, as I said, so I ride everywhere locally anyway. The car is more of a luxury item for me to get out of town if I do birding out of town or go away on a trip. But pretty much, I'd say, you know, 80 to 90% of what I do locally within, you know, I'd say within up to kind of maybe 20, 30 kilometers range is generally on my bike. But I do that. And as you said, it can be advantageous to see a number of different spots on the bike. And one thing I do like to do when we're allowed to go a bit further is right out west, kind of from Williamstown down to, you know, through Altona and down to Skeleton Creek. And there's lots of good spots to do that. And you can ride the whole way. And instead of having to kind of get in the car and then, you know, drive all the way around and get back out of the car, it's just on the bike. It's just really straightforward and quite simple. Sometimes the northerly wind isn't great on the ride home, but yeah, it's definitely, I like that aspect of it. And being during lockdown, it's been really great for that too. Just jump on the bike, and even to the spot that I was talking about for Latrobe, I'm out there in kind of 15 minutes. You know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
So it's quite good. Yeah.
And so, do you do, like, for example, would you do an eBird list whilst riding and stopping?
Not while riding. I mean, sometimes if I'm riding and I'm not stopping, and I'm not, you know, I haven't stopped with the intention of going birding, but if I see something or hear something, I'll just quickly stop the bike and make a recording or make a note. And, you know, I've got what, I mean, you can probably see a few of the bikes behind me, but I've got a few bikes that I've probably decked out a bit more specifically for birding. You know, I mean, this is just an example, but I even got like some small binoculars just to kind of fit. They fit in like a small pouch that I've got like off the handlebars, just for that reason, just a bit more lightweight. The phone goes as a mount for that on the handlebars. So I have enabled. There's a few things I've done to make the birding by bicycle a bit more, a bit easier and a bit more doable.
For sure.
But by the same token, I have, as I said, when I mentioned places like Williamstown, I have ridden down there with my scope, my tripod, my camera, you know, the full size binoculars in the past. So I have been known to kind of to take the whole proverbial kitchen sink with me, which is an undertaking, but I have done it. So
Wow. So
yeah.
you're riding with like the telescope like this, and with
No,
one hand.
kind of everything goes on the bike. There's no carrying. Like I've got the bike set up, so
Oh,
the
okay.
tripod. Yeah, the tripod. I've got a bag on the front of one of my bikes, and that takes the camera and the
Oh, gotcha.
camera and the
Yeah.
scope, and then the tripod strapped on either across the top tube or across the front of the bike. There's not really anything on my back when I ride, so it's the bike ends up heavier and a bit more cumbersome. But apart from that, it's not too bad. It just go a bit slower. That's all.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so just to finish up on the biking topic, have you been into bikes longer than birding, or like about the same?
Yeah, a
Or
lot,
oh, you have.
I'd say a lot longer. Like as I said, I mean, I work with bikes. I'm a workshop manager and have been a bicycle mechanic for over a decade, and I've
Yeah.
ridden bikes of various reasons and various iterations over the years. So it's something I've always done anyway. And probably the more serious aspect of cycling as a recreational pursuit has taken probably a bit more of a back seat the past number of years since the birding has become a bit more serious. But yeah, it's something I still do. Yeah, on a regular
Yeah,
basis. Like I
absolutely.
ride to work every day, and I'm on the bike pretty much most days just to get round. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really good.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, it has its limitations, of course. Like, I mean, I did without a car for a while, a number of years ago, but then when I started probably getting more interested in going a bit further in the state, or even interstate, I decided to get a car. So for the longer trips, it's obviously very hard unless you do a lot of planning. And I have done some kind of trips where I've done birding on multi-day bike trips. Like I mean, if you want one example, a number of years ago when I was first really getting probably quite serious about the birding, I did a trip all around the Mallee Parks with a friend of mine.
oh
So
wow,
yeah, we caught the
classic. Yeah.
train out, the Adelaide train, and got off at Nil, and then rode through the Mallee Parks from Nil northwards, went all through Little Desert and Murray Sunset and Hatter Lakes, and all around that area on bike. So yeah, that was really, really amazing experience. And I mean, it's an amazing experience to be out in that place anyway, because it's such a unique part of the state. And the Mallee, regardless of what you're doing out there, it's just lovely to be out there because it's so quiet and
Yeah.
rather desolate at times. And but yeah, that was a good example of probably one of the longer things I did on the bike involving a bit of birding. It wasn't a specific birding trip. The fellow that I went with isn't a birder, but he was pretty good about stopping off when I wanted to do a bit of birding at times and
Yeah.
poke around for things. So that was really good. Yeah, but so
Awesome.
yeah, you can sometimes I'm surprised what you can do, but for me, for the most part, it's just local stuff and stuff that's closer to home on the bike, and then when I want to go further, jump in the car.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, about the about like a more general example of like your best birding experience in Victoria, and indeed internationally, because you said you went to Canada and the US.
Yeah, so I mean, the international side of it, I lived in Canada on and off for about a decade in my mainly in my 20s and 30s, and wasn't much of a birder then. But a couple of years ago, I went back to where I was living in Canada. I lived on the west coast, mainly on Vancouver Island in Victoria, which is the provincial capital there. So I went back and had a bit of a visit for a couple of weeks and did quite a bit of birding when I was there, because by that stage I was well and truly into birding. So I did a bit there, and then went into the States where my brother lives. My brother lives in Nevada, so I visited him and did some birding around there, and then ended up in California after that for a week. So I did a bit of birding on that trip in Canada and the States, and that was really great to see some different things. And
yeah, it would be. Yeah. Because like
yeah,
the birding is so different in different parts of the world. It's really interesting. The contrasts you can have.
yeah,
For sure.
I think the interesting thing is, after you focus intently on your local area or on your state where you're from, where you go somewhere else, you're really being thrown in the deep end, and you're kind of
Yeah.
looking at to some degree you are a newbie all over again, just trying to get your head around the taxonomy and what's where. And so that aspect of it was pretty exciting. But I was quite, I suppose, to some degree surprised. Like, for instance, I stayed a couple of days in San Francisco, and for a city that's quite built up, it still has a lot of parks. The birding there's, to use that as an example, that's an incredible place to go birding. Like, the variety and the number of spots that are in the Bay Area is wonderful. So yeah, that was really great. yeah, but as far as state birding goes, I mean, I haven't been outside of the state much, probably because I've been content to kind of just look around Victoria. I've done a little bit in Tassie and a bit in New South Wales, but I haven't really been anywhere north to do any birding. To some degree, limitations on when I can and can't go, and the financial aspect, of course. I mean, I don't pretend to be particularly flush with cash like a lot of wealthy retirees are that can kind of seem to be able to just jet around wherever they want or kind of leave. So I definitely have that limitation.
For sure.
Probably the financial side of it is always a concern for me. I can't just afford to go wherever I want all the time. But Victoria, I mean, I suppose a lot of people from other states probably go, oh, bloody Victoria, and it's not that great, but it's an amazing state for birding. No one can deny that. I think anyone who's from Victoria has enjoyed, being able to see the variety of things that they can from a birding perspective from one end to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having that limitation actually means that when you do get out somewhere farther away, you're like, it's all the more amazing, because you're like, oh, this is great. Like, because in some sense you can value it a bit more because you know that there's that limitation that you had, and I'm familiar with that for sure. To stay up to date with new episodes of the Birding Today podcast, please follow Birding Today on Facebook and Instagram, as well as subscribing to the YouTube channel.
Like, I think the thing that I've found great about Victoria is just the diversity of places to go in, is what a relatively small state. I mean, sure, it's not small by world standards if you come from somewhere like Europe or whatever, but, you can drive, especially being in Melbourne, you can drive from one end, to one end of the state, like 4 or 5 hours away, and being in semi-arid, Mallee Desert, and then you can go the other direction and end up in rainforests of East Gippsland. So what's left of them, which has been another story. But so the sheer places, the number of places you can go, and the variety of places you can go, I think is what I've always and will probably continue to like about being a Victorian and living literally in the middle of Victoria and having it accessible with not have to drive for 2 days to get to places. You can usually, if you get in the car, drive for an afternoon or for the day to go as far as you want to go in the state. I think that's always, that's something that I do really value living here when we're actually allowed to go back out again, of course, because that's another whole topic to talk about.
Yeah, but, another episode.
Yeah.
For sure. And another aspect of the Victorian advantage, so to speak. I don't know if advantage is the right word, but we can get great pelagic birding here as well. And I know that you're really keen on pelagics, so I wanted to shift to that topic. So why is it pelagics what about pelagics speak to you?
I think probably the thing that speaks to me most about it is that things that you probably not so much you don't know they're there, but until you kind of get out to the ocean, you think, wow, here I am. You travel however many kilometers out, and all these things just start appearing that you wouldn't probably even. I mean, most people don't even know what pelagic is or what pelagic bird. And this is obviously from a non-birder's perspective. But when people ask about, what did you do on the weekend? I said, I went out in a boat into, out of the ocean and looked at birds. They're like, what? There's birds out there, and you kind of say, yeah, there's actually a lot that come in, actually right out in the middle of the ocean. So I think that aspect of being a very, very different subset of birding is what I really like about it. And as I said, I've always been an outdoors person. I spent a lot of time at the beach in my younger years surfing, and I've enjoyed the ocean and water. Not much from a boating perspective, but something about just being out in the middle of nowhere in blue water and just having birds around you is pretty incredible.
For sure, absolutely.
And getting to see those birds up so close is just it's just so great. The first time, I mean, no one can deny the first time you see something like an albatross that's 3 meters from your hand, that is pretty, amazing sight to see for sure.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Just to ask so do you mostly go out to Western Victoria, to Portland and over there?
Well, I mean, I think in my short time that I've been, doing really into birding, the only place I've been out of is Port Fairy. There's a pelagic that goes out of there semi-regularly. So that's the only place I've been out of Victoria. But there is been historical Portland trips, but I think as far as I know, Portland Port Fairy have been the two places you could go pelagic birding in Victoria. There might have been other places, but I'm not aware of them. But I think most people even people that have been into birding and down here for a couple of decades, for example, have always gone on trips out of Portland or Port Fairy. But myself, I've only been on the one out of Port Fairy. So
I think they discontinued the one because in 2011 when we had just got to Australia, we went on one from Portland, I think. But I think they've stopped that one, have they?
I think the boat's still available, but I think the guy who used to run it stopped doing it. But then last year there were a few times. I think maybe even earlier in the year, I went out a few times. But it's a bit more haphazard, I think. Pelagic birding in Victoria is maybe a bit haphazard as pelagic birding is anywhere. That's so dependent on a number of factors, the weather and whatever else. But I'm not too sure about the current state of affairs with the boats out of Portland. I know, a few people I know have been on them more recently, but that's about all I know. Whereas, I've only been on the one out of Port Fairy in Victoria. So, it's a long. I think going from Port Fairy or from Portland, it's a long trip out to the shelf, like on the boat. So there is that side of it. You do have to be prepared for a whole day. Just for 3 hours of just travel out to the continental shelf and then poke around and then come back. So it does end up a long day. Whereas other places in Australia, I think the shelf's a lot closer. I went on my first one out of Eaglehawk Neck and down near Hobart earlier in the year, and that's a lot closer to get out to where the seabirds come in. For that reason, it is advantageous, the fact that you can get on the boat and it's only an hour to get out to the shelf. And I think most people I think even from Northern Australia would, probably realise or probably argue that Eaglehawk Neck is, the pelagic place to go. I think, I think a lot of people go down there just to do the pelagic because it's such a good location and right where two, main currents meet. You get things down there that you don't see probably elsewhere in Australia. So but that was good. I did my first one, a double header of one of those earlier in the year when we were actually allowed that brief period of time when we were allowed out of the state, and managed to kind of get to Tasmania and back without having to be isolated and locked away. So I kind of got lucky there, and that was back in May, and that was an amazing time. It was really, really good.
So I wanted to ask how many roughly have you been on? How many pelagics?
Maybe not a dozen. I'd probably say just shy of a dozen. Yeah, I'd say
bad.
maybe
that's quite a lot.
Yeah, so the two in Tas, which were back to back on a weekend, and then probably the Port Fairy trip. I'd have to kind of look back at my records and whatnot, but I think I've probably been on somewhere between maybe 7 and 10 at a guess. I think. I think in 2018, I remember going on. I think I went on 4 or 5. I think maybe 5 that year. I think, and that was kind of amazing. But by the end of it, I was kind of like, now I need to kind of watch the kind of hole in my wallet for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
It's an expensive thing to do.
And so the first one you've ever went on, I suppose you remember that quite well. The first ever pelagic you went on. First of all, I want to know if you felt the motion sickness or if you had to take pills for that. Not at all.
Yeah. No, I took the pills because everyone recommends take them. I mean, I take them religiously anyway. I'm never sure whether I would get sick or not. But the first trip I went on, I took the pill, the travel sickness pills, and luckily I wasn't sick by then. But it was kind of getting up to there, and I definitely felt a bit kind of getting towards the green side by the end of it. I managed to kind of keep the insides intact, but that particular trip apparently was quite a rough one. And I remember at one stage when we were out there, I think out of the boat, which I think was barely 20 people, at one stage there was 6 or 7 people just lined up on one side, ejecting their stomachs out. So I think that was a bit of a rough one, that one, and that was probably the roughest one I can remember as far as the number of people laid out being sick and me feeling sick. Most of the time I feel a little bit queasy at times, and I found that if I focus just on the horizon, don't kind of like look at the back of the camera too much, or look down and just kind of stay focused on looking at them, all right. But some of the trips it does get to the point where on the way back or after floating around at the shelf for a while, I start to feel a bit queasy. I think it's the getting out to the Burley stops and actually when the boat, throws the anchor over and it just kind of floats around a bit like that. If it's not too rough, I feel like that's what maybe sets me off a bit more than the actual kind of traveling out there or back. But that's just me though. Some people, as you probably know, even if you haven't been on pelagics, some people just can't do them. They're just the side of a boat, even stepping onto them makes them green. So I suppose to some degree I'm one of the lucky ones that has managed to grip my teeth and not be sick yet. So knock on wood, hopefully I won't. But
that first pelagic, was that out of Port Fairy?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, gotcha. It was a couple of years back, and I actually went down there with Deb Oliver with that one. So
okay,
yeah, so,
nice.
Yeah.
And I know that you're keen into photography as well, because I've seen your Instagram, which, by the way, has the coolest bio, the pelagic tragic. I love that.
Yeah, right.
that's
well,
the best.
I mean, I think anyone who dedicates himself to pelagics is a bit of a tragic because it is an undertaking to do them. I think you give up your not so much give up, but you set aside your weekend to do it, and you don't always know whether they're going to go until a couple of days before because of the weather forecast. So I mean, I know people that have been going on pelagics for years, like birders that have obviously very experienced and been into birding for a number of decades, that will just go on pelagic after pelagic after pelagic, and they might not see new birds, but they get very, very dedicated to it. The thought of just, well, maybe I'm going to go on this one and something that I've never seen is going to fly by. So yeah, I mean, I think that aspect of pelagic birding is really great, just being out in expansive water, not knowing what may come by. Sometimes it's really quiet. Sometimes you'll get a really good diversity of seabirds. So
yeah, absolutely.
But that's birding in general, right? I mean, you're not guaranteed anything, and that's partly what makes bird watching enjoyable. You never know what you're going to see to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, I agree with that, and maybe that's more so for pelagics, maybe. But
yeah, I think. Well, I mean, by all reports, I think most people who do them would probably say that. I mean, I feel like I've been fairly lucky in the few that I've been on. I've seen, a good variety of birds, and I've seen new birds most trips. But I think it becomes, if you're going there purely just to try and see new birds after you've done maybe half a dozen or a dozen, it becomes the law of diminishing returns after a while, I think, as far as seeing new species. Yeah. But as with anything, it's just luck. And but even the few times where I haven't seen a new species or haven't had a new tick, quote unquote, I mean, I like it anyway. All it takes is a few birds to go past and you're like, this is great. I'm 50 kilometers from shore out in the middle of the ocean on a boat watching birds go around. So
yeah, no, there is something magical about it, and also the great thing is that especially it's a great spot for photographers to go out in the middle of the ocean, because there's so many things that can happen, so many angles and stuff. So I wanted to just see what you think about this, because I'm always interested in the balance between actively seeking great photos of birds and the act of birding itself. And you know what I mean? How do you? Because I've seen your Instagram and you've got stunning photos. So do you? I've got to look at my little bit of paper here to remember my question. But yeah. Oh, here we go. Is photography a main aim when you go birding?
It definitely has been in the past. I would say the last year or two, it probably hasn't been so much, but there's definitely been periods where that's what I've set out to do. I thought, like today, I'd like to go out and get an amazing photo. But and I have probably at some periods dedicated myself to practicing some photography a lot more rather than actually just concentrating on birding, quote unquote. So that is something I definitely have done at times, whereas the birding has been more the aspect of the trip or going out rather than the actual, birding or seeing what you can see or hoping you can see this, that, or the other. But lately it's been more about, I'm finding the last couple of years I haven't been taking the camera out as much. I mean, for instance, I've barely been taking my camera anywhere lately. Most of the photography that I've done has probably been in kind of pre-COVID, but yeah, I mean, I've done a little bit since then, but it really depends on the context and where I'm going. I take the camera on all the pelagics. Photographing birds at sea is a rewarding and frustrating experience. I mean, photography is a frustrating experience at the best of times anyway, because it's certainly not easy, and you always want to get a better shot. But
Yeah.
with that does bring its I always have to remind myself that you can always want a better photo, and I think that aspect of it sometimes overrides. When that starts to override the enjoyment of what you're doing, it's kind of like you leave feeling frustrated, going, oh well, like really want to get a better shot and I didn't get it. So it's something I probably had to try and concentrate on a little bit, to try and just be content with, okay, I got a decent photo, or if I was trying just to record a species, I got a photo and move along, rather than kind of go want more and want more and want more, because I feel like the photography side of it in some ways is problematic like that for birding. The fact that people, and I'm certainly not out to denigrate photographers, because I'm one myself and I do a lot of it, but I feel like when people are very, very into photography and that's all they do, sometimes I feel like people do push the boundaries, a bit with the kind of birding, and just kind of like not leaving birds alone, just constantly hassling them, which I find hard to deal with at the best of times. I mean, I don't pretend to be a saint when I'm birding, for the most part, but I try and stay within the bounds of what I consider ethical and what I'm willing to kind of do and not do. But yeah, I think the photography for me is like, I'm generally happy if I can get a photo that I'm happy with. I know they're not going to win any awards, or I'm not going to post it somewhere online and there's going to be a million people that go, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, it's certainly not what I'm, looking to do with the photos. But yeah, I mean, I'm attracted to the photography, and so it is something that I've spent quite a bit of time in the past doing and concentrating on. And in some respects, that did get me more interested in birding in the early days, because it was an excuse to kind of get out and try and see more and photograph them. But
yeah,
I mean, no one can deny. I mean, everyone loves getting a good photo if they're into, if you're into photography and you're into birding. I mean, no one can deny it's great to get a great shot of a bird you've seen. I mean, it's really a rewarding thing to do, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as a videographer, I'm quite into video.
Okay.
It's kind of the same thing, and as you say, sometimes it can detract from the experience of the bird itself. But the reason that I like to have a camera always on me is if by chance something rare turns up and I need to get a shot for the record.
Yeah, I'd like 100%. I do. I have this kind of bit of a joke I make with people, is that I said you should have left your camera at home, because if you leave your camera at home, something amazing will turn up. It's like, don't pull it out of your bag, because then there's something. As soon as you pull that camera out, the bird won't show. But it is a good tool for like that, for making for record. And sometimes even for me still, it really does help with ID for distant things, or things I'm it's still a bit unsure about. I think as a tool for that, it's really, really great too, to be able to review something instantly and analyze something as a still frame is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And at least from my own perspective, I feel like I'm a fairly competent birder, because I can identify most things I try and set out to see, or identify things, and there's not too many things that leave me stumped with identification, I would say. But undoubtedly, I think using my own photos is something that's helped me probably become a better birder, as in learning to identify birds from certain features, rather than just kind of read a field guide and then rely on your own memory while you're out in the field to try and remember what to look for. Sometimes it is nice to be able to have something just to review in front of you while you're out there. So I do like that side of the photography as well. But getting a good shot is a rewarding experience.
Yeah,
as I said.
It's a real compliment, isn't it, to the birding? I think it really adds something to have that other angle from which to see the birds. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, and if I think about the kind of, I suppose, like the birds I've twitched, or the kind of rarer birds I've seen, the ones that I've photographed, that's been the icing on the cake. To be able to kind of chase something down and then kind of get a photo of it before you go is really, really great.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, awesome. We'll start to wrap up now, because it's almost time. But I wanted, I had a question for you, Leigh, because I'll ask you the obligatory one. What's your favorite bird?
I knew you would ask me this. And I get asked this by friends that aren't birders as well, and it's a very hard question to answer, because it's to try and pick one out of obviously so many is tough. But I think, if I'm honest, I enjoy just some of the more common species still, like seeing them regularly. For instance, I still get a kick out of seeing every tawny frogmouth, no matter where they are in my local area. Like, I'm always happy to kind of stop and have a bit of a look. So they're definitely a favourite. Gang cockatoo is another favourite one.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes the more historical associations with birds, even before you become a real serious birder, I think stick with you. And for that reason, sometimes I feel like if someone says, "What's your favourite bird?" I will kind of default to a more common species, and rather than think of some far-flung rarity that I've only seen once, or someone said, "Oh, what's your favourite bird?" Everyone's, maybe people have got an inkling of birds, expect you to say, "Oh, orange-bellied parrot," or something like that. But they're not the ones that seem to always come to mind for me. They're all, I think it's more the ones that I haven't had to go too much trouble to see, and the ones that I continually see, I still get the most enjoyment out of. But yeah, I couldn't give you one bird though. That's
fair. That's like a
but yeah, I mean, that's a couple. There's a couple of species I do like, and
for sure.
Favorites. I think it'd be easier to give you a top 5 or a top 10 than a top 1.
Yeah. And just as a final question, which is what I was thinking of before, is as a flip side to that, what's the dream bird that you still need to see?
Need to see?
Need or want? Same thing.
Well, I think if I think about my own experience of trying to see birds that have turned up or that I haven't seen, I mean, probably the most notable dip for me, at least in my own short period of time, was not seeing the letter-winged kite that turned up a few years ago out in the west of the state. So there's been a few of those turn up in Victoria the last 5 to 10 years, and there was one that had been sticking around in a particular area for out in the west of the state for, I think, maybe not quite a week, and I was less than 24 hours too late, it had gone. So that was a bit of a bummer, but because that's obviously a very special bird. I think for anyone to see, they're quite rare and don't turn up too far from Melbourne all that often. So I mean, it was still a 3-hour drive and did some great birding anyway out there. But that was probably, I'd say, of a birding disappointment, not seeing that was probably the one I can think of the most. I think I've been pretty lucky, at least personally, in seeing most of the birds I've chased down, like the rarer birds, to try and find that have been reported, the ones that I've happened across. I've managed to see most of the ones that have been reported that I've actually gone out of my way to go and see. But the letter-winged kite, I would like to see. That'd be really great. Hopefully, definitely have my fingers crossed that one turns up, not too far from home in the, not too distant future, or at least before I'm well and truly gone.
Yeah. No, I think so. I've got a good feeling about it. I think.
Yeah, good.
But that's a good place to end, Leigh. So thanks so much for coming on the show, and I really appreciate
no worries. Good fun.
The time, and hope to maybe see you in the field sometime. Go birding together. That'd be good.
Yeah, well, I bump into your dad a bit, so I'm sure I'll see you sooner or later.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He's kind of omnipotent, isn't he? He's just everywhere.
Well, as I was saying, is one of those people that, I don't know, there's a handful of people that no matter where you are, you're just like, oh, you again, like, oh, g'day. Yeah, that's nice. So, yeah, maybe you will.
Awesome. Thanks, Leigh. See you soon.
No worries.
You've been listening to the Birding Today podcast. New episodes are released every Friday, and if you'd like to get in touch, just write an email to birdingtoday@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. So yeah, it's I've got them accessible on all the podcast platforms. So on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the other podcast platforms. I've got the video version on YouTube. And I've also got a Facebook page called Birding Today, because this kind of thing is kind of a sub thing from my brand Birding Today, which is mostly focused on video on YouTube on filming birds. So that's kind of a branching out of that.